It all begins on the day the school is consumed by flames. Panic spreads as students desperately search for a way out. Amid the chaos, Gio pushes through the burning hallways, but instead of heading for the exit, he goes straight to the art room. If death is unavoidable, he wants to spend his final moments in the place he loves most, surrounded by the artwork he poured his heart into. Standing before his painting of a cozy cabin hidden in a peaceful forest, Gio accepts what he believes is the end. But when he opens his eyes again, the fire is gone. The unbearable heat has been replaced by a cool breeze and warm sunlight, while the fresh scent of pine fills the air. Gio soon realizes he isn't dead. He has somehow entered the very painting he created. A week passes as Gio settles into the painted world. Occasionally he wonders whether the other students escaped the fire, but the peace surrounding him gradually puts his mind at ease. While walking through the forest with a basket, a strange creature suddenly peeks out from behind a bush. To his surprise, it's a friendly, three-eyed rabbit. Gio never imagined the creatures he painted could actually come to life. Time also flows differently here. Salt-coated unicorns wander through the gardens, and the world continues developing around him. Although he doesn't know how much time has truly passed, he has already discovered several rules governing this mysterious place. The first is simple: anything he paints becomes real. Apples fall from the canvas at his touch, while food, tools, furniture, trees, salt sacks, kitchen utensils, and flowers can all be created with his brush. With an endless supply of necessities, Gio no longer needs grocery stores. However, his ability has one major limitation: he cannot create living people. When he once paints someone for company, the figures emerge as warm but lifeless bodies resembling freshly deceased corpses. They have no heartbeat, breath, or soul. Surprisingly, Gio feels relieved by this discovery. He would rather remain alone than play God and turn his peaceful sanctuary into something disturbing. The second rule is even more remarkable. A golden picture frame hanging from a massive tree allows Gio to observe the outside world. The first time he looks through it, he discovers that 31 years have passed since the school fire. The world he once knew is gone, replaced by a harsh reality where people with supernatural powers battle enormous monsters across ruined cities. After witnessing those scenes, Gio decides he has no reason to leave his peaceful refuge. He isn't meant to be a hero, so he returns to his painting, believing that a picture belongs safely inside its frame. Meanwhile, the forest continues expanding on its own. What began as a simple cabin surrounded by trees gradually becomes a thriving ecosystem. Glowing plants, crystal vegetation, and breathtaking landscapes appear naturally over the decades despite Gio never painting them. The creatures also grow attached to him. Rare birds with brilliant feathers freely land on his shoulders without fear, seemingly recognizing him as the creator of their paradise. To Gio, their affection feels natural because he is the one who brought their world into existence. His days become a simple routine of gathering ingredients and deciding what to cook. Then, a fourth rule unexpectedly reveals itself. A floating system window appears before Gio, displaying information about a fruit he has just picked. Through conversations he secretly overhears using the golden frame, he learns that this system isn't unique to his forest. It belongs to hunters, people in the outside world who have awakened supernatural abilities. Somehow Gio has become a hunter without ever leaving his painting. For him, life inside the painting feels like a relaxing RPG focused on gathering ingredients, crafting useful items, and cooking. The system even provides medicinal recipes based on the herbs and fruits he collects, making each day feel like discovering new content. Gio considers this the perfect life: good food, peaceful sleep, and no more work. Today's meal is honey-glazed sautéed sweet potatoes made entirely from ingredients in his endless pantry. When he was a teacher, he barely had time to cook because of his busy schedule. Now he can spend nearly 3 hours preparing and enjoying one meal without rushing. But just as he settles into his peaceful routine, an unfamiliar sound comes from the entrance. Gio immediately freezes. That isn't supposed to happen. Every sound Gio normally hears comes from somewhere within his forest, and the golden frame hanging from the tree remains completely silent. Yet something outside the painting has clearly moved. This reveals the final rule, the one that changed everything 31 years earlier. Deep inside the ruined art room of the burned school, one painting has survived untouched by the flames and the passage of time. From that day onward, Gio ceases to exist as an ordinary person in the outside world and becomes part of the painting itself. His expression on the canvas remains calm and unchanged, completely unaware that someone has discovered him. The artwork radiates a strange energy, surrounded by a dark aura that seems to absorb the light around it. Gio's portrait looks as though it was painted yesterday, rather than surviving untouched for more than 3 decades. Meanwhile, inside the painting, Gio assumes the sound he heard was only a wild animal, and returns to his peaceful routine. He gathers ingredients while happily whistling, unaware of what is happening outside. On the first day, he prepares fresh vegetables with ingredients created by his magical brush. By the third day, a large pot is simmering over the fire, filling the cabin with the aroma of homemade food. After serving himself a generous plate of pasta, Gio smiles, convinced he can spend the rest of his life in this peaceful paradise. Afterward, he wraps himself in a warm blanket, settles onto the sofa, and falls asleep, satisfied with his perfect life. Back in the ruined school, treasure hunters are amazed to find the painting in flawless condition, without a single scratch or speck of dust. One of them activates his appraisal skill and discovers its official name, Portrait of Gio. The group is stunned. The abandoned school lies deep within the Gangwon Mountains, yet the painting looks brand new. They immediately conclude that it must be a dungeon artifact, making it potentially worth a fortune on the black market. They carefully wrap the painting for transport, already imagining the fortune the Collectors Guild could pay for such a rare discovery. While Gio continues sleeping peacefully inside the painting, his entire world begins moving. Through the golden frame, he watches the scenery outside change from the burned forest to open farmland, then to towering buildings and bright city lights. His painting is being transported at incredible speed. Eventually, it is placed inside a warehouse filled with wooden crates. The constant movement makes the entrance to his painted world feel strangely unstable. Before long, the portrait arrives at an elegant auction hall filled with wealthy buyers. The auctioneer starts the bidding, and everyone competes to own the mysterious portrait of the young man. They admire the artwork without realizing that Gio is quietly watching them from inside. The bids quickly rise beyond the treasure hunter's expectations. One wealthy man wearing expensive gold rings confidently raises paddle number 5, and eventually the auction ends with the portrait being sold to an elite collector. The painting is transported to his private gallery, protected by magical barriers, enchanted chains, and numerous security seals. An elevator descends to floor F5, the highest security level reserved for rare and dangerous artifacts. A researcher in a white lab coat carries the painting down a long hallway into the luxurious gallery, where countless extraordinary relics are restrained by talismans and enchanted chains. A richly decorated hand covered in gold rings reaches toward the painting, as its new owner prepares to admire it. Portrait of Gio is then mounted against a spotless white wall as the newest treasure in the collection. Standing before it is Vizel, the leader of the Collectors Guild and an S-class hunter. One of his assistants had questioned whether purchasing such a mysterious artifact was wise, but Vizel dismisses the concern. As a true collector, he refuses to ignore something this unique, regardless of its potential danger. He reminds his subordinate that the money is his to spend, especially on an artifact of this value. Vizel also reveals that even the president of the Hunters Association had shown considerable interest in acquiring the painting during the auction. 31 years earlier, the Great Catastrophe had changed the world forever. Dungeons suddenly appeared across the planet, and terrifying beings known as divinities emerged, destroying everything in their path. Entire dimensions collide, permanently reshaping Earth's geography and reality. During humanity's darkest hour, a mysterious system appears, granting people the powers needed to survive. Over time, the president of the Hunters Association becomes a symbol of hope for mankind, making it unsettling that even she competed fiercely for Gio's portrait at the auction and offered an enormous sum for it. Despite possessing one of the highest-ranked appraisal skills in existence, Vizel cannot uncover any useful information about the painting. Every time he examines it, he sees only unreadable symbols. His assistant apologizes, believing his own abilities are insufficient to identify the artifact, but Vizel admits that even he has no idea what the painting truly is. Rather than disappointing him, the mystery only deepens Vizel's fascination. Sitting in his office, he continues studying the portrait while his assistant struggles to understand how Korea's greatest appraiser could fail to identify a single object. Vizel simply smiles, knowing his reputation is at stake. No item has ever completely resisted his legendary appraisal skill. Although he jokes to ease the tension, his golden eyes reveal his growing obsession. The greater the mystery and danger, the more irresistible the painting becomes. Determined to uncover its secrets, Vizel wonders who Gio really is and what lies behind his painted face. He cannot deny that whoever created the masterpiece possessed talent far beyond an ordinary human. An overwhelming sense of life radiates from the canvas, making it feel as though someone is truly sealed inside. Even Gio's painted eyes seem to follow Vizel's every movement. When Vizel focuses his senses on the painting, he discovers something unexpected, hidden within its colors. Instead of an ordinary canvas, he encounters complete darkness, an endless void that seems to swallow everything around it. Then brilliant colors begin appearing within the darkness. Stars, galaxies, and glowing nebulae spread across the emptiness, forming an enormous cosmic landscape. For a moment, Vizsla wonders if the painting contains an entire universe. Gio's expression remains unchanged, concealing the truth of his existence. Vizsla slowly steps back, staring at his newest treasure with admiration and greed. His instincts had been correct from the beginning. The painting is anything but ordinary. His appraisal skill has failed completely, yet that only makes the artifact more fascinating. His golden eyes shine with curiosity as he continues studying it. Inside the painted world, however, Gio watches the unfamiliar surroundings beyond the golden frame with growing confusion and fear. He realizes that his peaceful life may no longer be safe. He never imagined someone would discover his quiet little world. When Vizsla approaches the painting and speaks directly to him, Gio freezes. Vizsla cheerfully greets the portrait and politely asks whether the master inside can hear him. Panicking, Gio immediately hides behind a nearby tree and refuses to respond. From there, he carefully observes the luxurious gallery where his painting has been placed. The elegant decorations, lighting, and carefully arranged displays make it clear that the owner treasures his collection. For Gio, this creates a serious problem. The painting is his only connection to the outside world. If anyone discovers that he is actually alive inside it, they might mistake him for a dangerous intruder or something even worse. His imagination quickly runs wild. He worries that people might believe he is a cursed painting and decide to destroy him by burning the canvas. To Gio, the outside world suddenly seems terrifying. When no response comes, Vizsla assumes he approached too suddenly. He politely apologizes, says goodbye, and promises to return the next day. After Vizsla leaves, Gio grabs his head in frustration. It feels as though someone is harassing him from the other side of reality, and he has no idea how to deal with it. Despite the tension outside, life inside the painting remains peaceful. The next morning, Gio starts his day with a hearty breakfast of eggs and sausage. Afterward, he decides to make tea using flowers he gathered before they wilted. Since he doesn't have a teapot, he simply paints one onto his canvas, and moments later it becomes real. He pours himself a cup of bright blue tea and takes a satisfying sip, finally calming his nerves. A system notification then identifies the drink as medicinal butterfly flower tea, which can strengthen immunity. Gio smiles at the useful effect, though he has no way to test whether it actually works anymore. Ever since entering the painting, Gio has stopped being an ordinary human. He no longer feels hunger, fatigue, or cold, and his body seems to have evolved beyond normal biological limits. Whether he spends hours gathering ingredients under the blazing sun or walking through chilly weather, he never gets tired or even breaks a sweat. He also no longer has any biological needs. He doesn't need food to survive or even a bathroom anymore. Ironically, he keeps a painted toilet hanging on the wall simply as a humorous reminder of his old life. Looking at his reflection in the water, Gio wonders if this is the ultimate form of being human. While enjoying another bite of food, he decides that never having to clean a bathroom again is one of the greatest benefits of his new existence. His peaceful thoughts are soon interrupted by another voice coming through the golden frame. Gio immediately recognizes Vizsla's voice and grows anxious. For 11 straight days, the guildmaster has continued visiting the painting, trying to convince Gio to work with him. No matter how many times Gio ignores him, Vizsla refuses to give up. Gio only wants a quiet life, but the wealthy collector repeatedly asks whether he ever gets lonely living alone. Although the system assures Gio that Vizsla poses no immediate danger, the constant attention makes him feel suffocated. Vizsla continues talking to the portrait, joking that the mysterious young man only blinks and never answers. This time, he arrives with his assistant and another person whose head is covered by a bag and whose hands are tightly bound. The captive has been brought as an offering in hopes of finally getting a reaction from the artist. Vizsla casually explains that if Gio doesn't like this particular sinner, he can bring another, since finding criminals in the modern world is easy. He even offers Gio anything he wants, whether people, objects, or contracts. Inside the painting, Gio simply stares into space. He knows that responding even once could end his peaceful life forever. He continues drinking his tea, though the constant pressure has made it taste like nothing. From everything he has overheard, Gio already knows that Vizsla leads one of the country's most powerful organizations. Even Vizsla's assistant seems confused by his master's strange behavior. Eventually, Vizsla sighs in disappointment when the portrait remains silent. Gio doesn't move and continues pretending to be an ordinary painting, hoping the collector will eventually give up. At last, Vizsla decides to leave and promises to return later. He walks down the luxurious hallway with his assistant, leaving the gallery silent once again. Clutching his teacup, Gio admits that Vizsla doesn't seem evil, and that he can't sense any real malice from him. Even so, he has no intention of leaving his peaceful life. Having Vizsla appear every day is mentally exhausting for someone as introverted as Gio. He collapses onto the sofa and releases a long sigh before getting back up and searching through several storage boxes. Geo believes Vissel will eventually lose patience after being ignored for so long, but he still wants to prepare for the possibility that he may have to communicate with the outside world. He takes out a bag of flour and carefully sifts it into a bowl. If he ever has to interact with other people, he wants to have something worthwhile to offer them. At the same time, a troubling possibility crosses his mind. If Vissel becomes frustrated enough, he might decide to burn the painting. If that happens, Geo's entire world could be destroyed. Determined not to leave his survival to chance, Geo continues mixing the ingredients. He has no idea what would happen if the canvas outside were damaged, so he knows he must prepare himself. His eyes fall on an old hourglass nearby as he finishes. He has no intention of being burned alive. If he wants to survive, he needs to take action rather than leave the only entrance to his world under someone else's control. Soon, Geo finishes baking several small snacks resembling tiny potatoes. To him, this is the first step toward taking control of his own fate. As the final grains of sand fall through the hourglass, an elevator arrives at basement level 5 in the outside world. At 4 in the morning, a female curator quietly walks through the silent gallery during her nightly inspection. She checks the temperature and makes sure every preservation procedure is being followed. Eventually, she reaches the gallery displaying Geo's priceless portrait. Because it is one of the guild's most valuable possessions, she examines it more carefully than the others. At first, everything appears normal. Then something catches her attention. She freezes and slowly looks down at the marble floor. Bare footprints. Someone has walked across the cold floor barefoot, which is impossible because she is supposed to be completely alone. Fear immediately spreads through her body. The hairs on the back of her neck rise as she senses someone standing directly behind her in the darkness. Cold sweat forms across her forehead as she feels an intense gaze fixed on her. It definitely isn't another employee making their rounds. The enormous gallery suddenly feels much darker and more terrifying than before. The silence suddenly breaks with a quiet greeting. At the same moment, a system notification appears before the curator, identifying the presence as something non-human. A hooded figure slowly materializes in the room, surrounded by dark energy that makes it appear both intimidating and unnatural. The terrified curator is unable to move. She stares at the figure in disbelief as the papers in her hands scatter across the room and her pens slip from her trembling fingers. Panic overwhelms her as she faces what she believes to be a ghost. The scene then shifts to the headquarters of the Collectors Guild, one of Korea's 3 most influential guilds. The massive building reflects its wealth and authority, while Vissel's private gallery remains accessible only to a select few. A man carrying a briefcase walks through the brightly lit halls and stops at the elevator. His name is Young Gun, an A-class hunter and the guild's chief security curator. When a coworker tells him about the reported ghost, Young Gun responds skeptically. His exhausted partner explains that the situation on basement level 5 has become increasingly serious. As they discuss the incident over coffee, Young Gun learns that 17 separate reports have been filed over the past 2 weeks describing the same phenomenon. Everyone knows Vissel doesn't care whether an artifact is dangerous, as long as it is valuable enough to add to his collection, and his unusual taste has already caused plenty of trouble. Frightened screams have recently become common throughout the gallery. In the current world, ghosts are often dangerous monsters, although Young Gun points out that ghost sightings themselves aren't unusual. What concerns him is the sudden number of reports coming from the same location. Human Resources has tried to keep the rumors from spreading outside the building to protect the gallery's reputation, but they can't guarantee the secret will remain hidden. Young Gun tightens his grip around his coffee, already expecting hours of overtime. Despite handling countless strange cases throughout his career, something about this one feels different. When his partner explains that he needs Young Gun to investigate, Young Gun immediately becomes serious and switches into investigation mode. His partner assures him that he trusts him more than anyone for the job, and jokingly suggests that he should accept a promotion to administrative manager. Young Gun laughs it off, saying the suggestion is asking too much. Before joining the Collectors Guild, Young Gun had led an investigation team within the Hunters Association. His experience is exceptional, although he didn't leave the association on good terms. Many people criticized his decision to leave public service for the private sector. Young Gun prefers to avoid unnecessary attention and simply do his current job without attracting notice. Both men understand that if the rumors escape the building, the gallery could suffer serious damage. They need to prepare a proper report for Vissel as quickly as possible. His partner hands him a folder containing all the witness statements collected so far, and Young Gun begins reviewing the evidence. The first sighting occurred at 4:32 a.m. The witness was a healthy 24-year-old employee with no history of illness, and her description of the figure was remarkably detailed. The entity was nearly 190 centimeters tall, well-built, pale-skinned, and dressed in a black cloak. The employee had even sketched what she saw. According to her testimony, the mysterious figure was extraordinarily handsome, an unusually specific detail. The report also states that maintaining eye contact with him was strangely difficult. Despite that, every witness consistently described the figure as exceptionally attractive. More unsettling is the fact that he moved through the gallery in complete silence, without making the slightest sound. Young Gun continues flipping through the files and finds that every witness has described exactly the same figure. This isn't a hallucination. Everyone has seen the same mysterious person. The entity appears openly rather than trying to hide itself, which concerns Young Gun even more. His partner agrees. According to everything they know, any being that emerges from a dungeon is naturally hostile toward humanity. There has never been an exception. Yet this mysterious figure has appeared repeatedly without harming a single employee. That alone makes the case deeply unsettling. If the existence of such a creature ever became public, it would dominate headlines around the world. Before that could happen, the Hunters Association would undoubtedly seize the creature and lock it away as one of the highest priority research subjects in existence. Young Gun suddenly stops at a particular page in the report, visibly irritated by what he reads. According to the witness statements, whenever someone encounters the mysterious figure, it politely asks if they would like to talk. It even introduces itself as Geo. The strange entity genuinely believes it is an ordinary human. After introducing himself, Geo politely asks for the other person's name. Even when employees are too frightened to make eye contact, he remains calm, courteous, and respectful. What makes the encounters even stranger is how ordinary the conversations are. Geo never asks for secrets or personal information, and if someone seems uncomfortable, he simply ends the conversation without forcing them to continue. Then comes the strangest part. At the end of every successful conversation, Geo gives the employee a small gift. His partner points Young Gun toward another section of the report, telling him to see what those gifts actually are. Young Gun turns the page and stares at the photographs in disbelief. His shock soon turns into professional confusion. The gifts are ordinary-looking sweets, cookies, lollipops, and boxes of chocolate. He can't understand why a seemingly harmless monster would give people candy. When he asks whether the contents were analyzed, his partner explains that Vizel immediately had everything tested and even used prison inmates for the experiments. Young Gun rubs his forehead, unsurprised that Vizel would do something like that. He then asks the obvious question, were the sweets poisoned? His partner shakes his head. They are medicine. Young Gun is momentarily speechless. According to the laboratory reports, the sweets possess extraordinary medicinal properties. Some treat anemia, others improve digestion, and several function as extremely powerful painkillers. Most astonishingly, every gift perfectly matches the specific health condition of the employee who receives it. Even the Guild's researchers cannot explain how ordinary-looking snacks possess such precise healing abilities. The more Young Gun learns, the more dangerous Geo seems. His instincts as an experienced hunter tell him not to lower his guard. A creature capable of accurately reading someone's physical condition and instantly producing customized medicine is clearly far from ordinary. Even more concerning, Geo has somehow bypassed every magical barrier and security measure protecting the Guild's private gallery. That can only mean he possesses extraordinary concealment abilities. The entire gallery has become surrounded by an unexplained phenomenon that none of the Guild's experts can understand. Young Gun quietly reaches his conclusion. This is almost certainly an extremely high-ranking monster. Ironically, Geo's apparent kindness makes the situation even more frightening. Young Gun would rather face a monster that attacks people on sight. History has taught hunters that dungeon beings displaying goodwill can be far more dangerous. 11 years earlier, humanity had attempted peaceful diplomacy with a civilization from another dimension. Representatives from several nations traveled there hoping to establish friendly relations. All of them returned, but none were still completely human. Scientists later described them as healthy malformations. The other civilization hadn't intended to harm the ambassadors. They simply believed the human body was flawed and, out of genuine kindness, had completely reshaped their bodies into forms humans could barely recognize. The horrifying incident permanently changed humanity's policies. Since then, every intelligent being originating from a dungeon has automatically been classified as an enemy, regardless of how peaceful it appears. Young Gun slowly closes the investigation file, his expression hardening. This ghost won't be an easy opponent, but investigating mysterious phenomena is his specialty, so he accepts responsibility for the case. His partner looks relieved, knowing that the Guild's chances of resolving the incident have increased significantly with Young Gun in charge. Young Gun picks up his briefcase and prepares to leave, but his partner stops him with one more important detail. Young Gun asks when all of this began. The answer is immediate. Everything started on the exact day Guild Master Vizsla placed Gio's portrait on display in basement level 5. As the elevator doors slowly close, Young Gun remembers that day clearly. It was the beginning of every problem he is now investigating. Vizsla had arrived in his usual dramatic fashion, overflowing with excitement. Surrounded by priceless relics and ancient treasures, he loudly called for Young Gun from across the luxurious gallery, eager to place him in charge of protecting the guild's newest acquisition. He then informed Young Gun that he had a new assignment for him. Vizsla announces his newest acquisition with an excited grin, his golden eyes filled with ambition and obsession as he admires the masterpiece while holding a glass of wine. He proudly introduces it as the portrait of Gio. From a distance, Young Gun's assistant watches sympathetically. He already knows what will happen. Whenever Vizsla becomes obsessed with a new artifact, Young Gun is the one who ends up dealing with the consequences. As the elevator doors close, Young Gun recalls the orders he received earlier. His exhausted expression shows that he already expects another sleepless night. While descending toward the lower levels, he lets out a long sigh, knowing Vizsla's eccentric interests always leave him with more work. After reaching basement level 5, Young Gun pulls a piece of candy from his pocket and mutters that this won't be just extra work, but another mountain of overtime. He bites down on the lollipop until it shatters, using the crunch to vent his frustration. The elevator display confirms floor F5. Stepping into the dim hallway, Young Gun immediately switches into professional mode and focuses on the mystery inside the restricted gallery. He checks his phone. It is exactly 4:29 a.m. Young Gun officially begins his investigation into the mysterious portrait of Gio. Only a few steps later, he suddenly stops. Something is there. His blue eyes narrow and faintly glow in the darkness. At the far end of the hallway stands a tall figure wrapped in a heavy black cloak, surrounded by a pale white glow that softly illuminates the nearby artwork. Young Gun immediately compares the figure with the witness reports. Black cloak, dark hair, bare feet, and approximately 188 centimeters tall. Every detail matches. Hidden behind a large decorative vase, Young Gun quietly studies the creature. It always appears shortly before dawn, when security patrols are at their lowest. He can't believe that timing is a coincidence. Either the entity understands when it is being watched, or some supernatural condition determines when it can manifest. He considers whether it is simply shy or highly intelligent. Given its human appearance, he leans toward the latter and prepares his equipment. Reviewing his digital investigation notes, Young Gun confirms that Gio's appearances have followed no consistent pattern. Finding the mysterious figure during his first investigation is extremely fortunate. He activates the sound enhancement function in his earpiece and decides to observe for now. According to the reports, Gio moves so silently that he seems like a ghost. Suddenly, the device detects an unfamiliar vibration. The strange frequency sends chills through Young Gun's body. Something inside the gallery has changed. He remains completely still and listens carefully. His enhanced hearing picks up every tiny sound around him, even the faint rustling of grass somewhere beyond the painting. Meanwhile, Gio calmly walks through the gallery like an ordinary visitor. He admires the artwork but never touches anything. That catches Young Gun's attention. Perhaps the figure respects the exhibits because it possesses intelligence, or perhaps it is searching for something specific. Gio eventually stops before an ancient vase. Beneath his hood, his expression remains calm with the slight melancholy described by every witness. Then he suddenly looks up. Their eyes meet. Young Gun immediately reaches for his earpiece as the atmosphere becomes unbearably heavy. What stares back at him no longer resembles a young man. Instead, he sees endless darkness with eyes like bottomless voids. Young Gun's mind freezes. Unable to process what he is seeing, he stumbles backward and crashes onto the floor. The darkness seems impossibly deep, yet a faint, mysterious light exists within it. Beyond the endless void, Young Gun senses something unimaginably vast watching him, something ancient and terrifying. His instincts scream that another existence is hiding inside that darkness. Overwhelmed by fear, Young Gun scrambles to his feet and flees. He races through the gallery corridors as though death itself is chasing him, desperate to put as much distance as possible between himself and the portrait. Moments later, the painting appears completely ordinary again, without the slightest sign that anything unusual happened. Still breathing heavily, Young Gun forces out a nervous laugh, realizing that the entity had somehow hidden itself. Even with his experience, the situation is becoming difficult to understand, and he wonders if he imagined what he saw. Inside the painted forest, however, Gio lies flat on the grass and lets out an exhausted sigh. The human has frightened him more than he wants to admit. Geo can't understand why someone was secretly watching him from the shadows. Thinking back, he realizes that every employee who encountered him immediately ran away in terror. Looking toward the golden frame connecting his world to the outside, Geo wonders if he somehow appeared frightening to them. Geo wonders if the employees simply believed he was the one chasing them. Determined to avoid further misunderstandings, he decides to do a better job pretending to be nothing more than an ordinary portrait. Just then, a curious three-eyed rabbit hops toward him. Geo smiles and reaches out to pet it, but the rabbit immediately jumps back and scampers away, leaving his hand awkwardly suspended in the air. Geo sighs. The forest animals always approach him without fear, yet the moment he tries to touch them, they run away. He closes his hand into a fist, wishing he had a pet he could hold and shower with affection. His gaze drifts toward the blank canvas inside his cabin. Despite living in a beautiful paradise, loneliness remains his constant companion, hidden within the portrait. Geo continues protecting the secret of his existence, hoping that one day he will find someone he can truly befriend. The following day, Young Gun stands before Geo's portrait once again. After taking a deep breath to calm himself from the previous night's encounter, he silently organizes his thoughts. He had believed yesterday that the mysterious entity would never appear again, but he was wrong. Now the real investigation begins. Young Gun is convinced that the portrait isn't an ordinary monster. His goal is to discover exactly what Geo is and whether humans can peacefully coexist with him. Simply standing before the portrait makes Young Gun feel strangely exhausted. Looking into Geo's eyes seems to gradually drain his strength. Since the Great Catastrophe, humanity has survived by studying monsters and learning their behavior. Unknown creatures cannot always be defeated through force, so understanding them is sometimes the only path to survival. Just then, Geo speaks first and asks whether Young Gun would like to have a conversation. Young Gun calmly agrees, understanding that communication with mysterious beings has become an important part of surviving in the modern world. Inside the painting, Geo feels genuinely touched. He expected Young Gun to remain frightened after their encounter the previous night, but instead the investigator speaks calmly to a living portrait and even seems concerned about Geo's feelings. Young Gun begins by apologizing for his behavior the previous day, and the simple gesture earns Geo's trust. After all, people in this world fight monsters larger than buildings every day, so talking to a living painting shouldn't be especially strange. Geo accepts the apology with a gentle smile and asks for Young Gun's name. The question makes Young Gun hesitate. In the modern world, revealing one's real name can be dangerous because many magical contracts require both parties to exchange names before taking effect. If Geo intends to deceive him, giving away his real name could put him at serious risk. However, everything Young Gun has observed suggests that Geo wouldn't misuse his trust. After a brief pause, he introduces himself as Young Gun. Geo smiles warmly and notices that Young Gun seems to have something he wants to ask. Young Gun immediately asks whether the figure he encountered the previous night was really Geo. Geo answers honestly that it was. Young Gun then asks whether Geo can actually leave the painting. Geo calmly confirms that he can leave whenever he wants. Young Gun nearly loses his composure. He can't believe such important information was revealed so casually, so he asks why Geo would tell him something like that. Geo simply explains that Young Gun asked. The answer leaves Young Gun wondering what would happen if someone with evil intentions asked the same question. Geo assures him that he wouldn't reveal the information to such a person. He explains that Young Gun is kind and polite, which is why he chose to answer honestly. Those simple words leave Young Gun speechless. He begins to realize that Geo can distinguish good people from bad ones with remarkable accuracy. Another question forms in his mind. If an evil person stood before the painting, would Geo simply ignore them? Or would he fight back? Before he can continue, Geo asks whether he has any other questions. Young Gun immediately remembers the strange rumors spreading through the gallery. Employees have reported a mysterious ghost wandering through the halls and handing out delicious gifts. He asks Geo whether that ghost was him. Instead of answering, Geo suddenly asks whether Young Gun always carries art supplies with him. The unexpected question catches Young Gun off guard, but he confirms that he does. In a place like this, he never knows what he might encounter, so he prefers to stay prepared. Considering everything that has happened, he feels that precaution has clearly been worthwhile. Geo remains silent for several moments after hearing himself called a ghost. Young Gun immediately realizes that he may have offended him. Young Gun apologizes for calling Geo a ghost. Geo reassures him that it is understandable and admits that a talking painting is certainly unusual. However, he clarifies that he has never actually died. That statement immediately changes Young Gun's understanding of the situation. His curiosity grows, and he asks whether Geo was always a painting and why he had been wandering through the gallery. Geo patiently explains that after unexpectedly becoming part of the painting and arriving at the gallery, he became curious about his surroundings. The countless rare artworks fascinated him, giving him something to explore. He also enjoyed watching the employees and learning about their names, interests, and daily lives. After living in complete solitude for so long, ordinary conversations had become precious to him. Young Gun listens carefully and notices that Geo speaks about humans with a certain emotional distance, as though he no longer considers himself one of them. Geo then explains that he prefers speaking with polite and kind people like Young Gun. Young Gun smiles, realizing that he has apparently matched Geo's preferred type of person. Geo then admits that he actually prefers talking to the gallery staff because they are easier to deal with than the guild leader. Clearly referring to Vizel, Young Gun quietly laughs. After their short conversation, he realizes that Geo is far more talkative than anyone expected. Geo explains that Vizel talks so much that he rarely gets a chance to respond. Young Gun imagines the two of them having endless one-sided conversations, with Vizel enthusiastically talking while Geo simply listens. Remembering his eccentric boss, Young Gun realizes that Vizel had given him surprisingly little information before assigning him the investigation. He apologizes for Vizel's behavior, describing his guild leader as an unusually eccentric person. Geo nods, further convincing Young Gun that he genuinely has no hostility toward people unless he personally considers them evil. Yet one question still occupies Young Gun's mind. What exactly is Geo? As he processes everything he has learned, the emblem on his uniform gives off a faint glow. After a brief silence, Geo asks whether he has any more questions. Young Gun asks whether Geo can still see the outside world even when his eyes are closed inside the painting. He can't understand why Geo still wants to maintain contact with humanity. Geo compares it to looking through a window during a bus ride. When his eyes are open, he watches the scenery and sometimes feels like talking to people. Otherwise, he simply observes the outside world quietly from within his own. That is how he has lived ever since remaining inside the burned school. Young Gun carefully considers the comparison, and for the first time, he views the situation from an entirely different perspective. The idea fascinates him while also making him uneasy. The pieces of the mystery finally begin fitting together. Looking at the painting, Young Gun wonders if Geo sees the outside world the way ordinary people see paintings. Perhaps, from Geo's perspective, humans are the ones living inside the frame. Young Gun awkwardly admits that Geo's honesty has caught him completely off guard. Geo simply explains that he was only trying to be polite. Those words leave a strong impression on Young Gun. Good manners, respect, and simple kindness may matter just as much when communicating with unknown beings as they do between ordinary people. Satisfied that he has answered most of the important questions, Young Gun allows himself a small smile. Despite everything, their conversation has been surprisingly pleasant. He checks his phone. It is exactly 9 a.m. The interview is over. Young Gun immediately returns to Vizel's office and throws the door open, warning his guild leader that the portrait is dangerous. Vizel calmly sips his tea without showing the slightest concern and casually asks what makes it dangerous. Young Gun immediately clarifies that he means the portrait, explaining that Geo is completely different from every monster humanity has encountered. Past monsters had overwhelmed people with twisted goodwill until they were suffocated by it. What concerns him most is that Geo genuinely considers himself human. Young-un cannot determine whether Geo truly believes this or simply wants to believe it. But if something goes wrong, the consequences could be unimaginable. He adds that Geo has his own concept of good and evil and judges people according to his personal standards. Young-un cannot predict how Geo might react if he ever encounters someone genuinely evil, so he suggests sending the portrait to the Hunter Association for research. Bisabul admits that he expected Young-un to reach that conclusion. However, the more he hears about Geo, the more convinced he becomes that Young-un is simply trying to do the right thing. Instead of approving the proposal, he orders Young-un to continue speaking with Geo, become closer to him, and eventually introduce them properly. He also asks Young-un to find out what Geo likes, admitting that the request is rather personal. Young-un accepts without complaint, considering it part of his job. Bisabul wonders why all his employees are so unfazed, and Young-un replies that it is probably because the guild leader only hires people like them. Reflecting on the conversation, Young-un realizes Bisabul's obsession with collecting extends far beyond rare objects. Every employee in the Collectors Guild has been personally selected, trained, and transferred by him. Regardless of their rank, Bisabul never recruits anyone carelessly. If simply standing near Geo can overwhelm strong-willed hunters and cloud their judgment, then Geo's soul must be extraordinary. Young-un promises to continue submitting regular reports, and Bisabul dismisses him. As Yonggun leaves, he cannot shake the feeling that his guild leader might actually be planning to destroy the world. Soon afterward, day 3 of exploring Jio's portrait begins. Yonggun starts by asking whether Jio ever feels lonely. Jio says he does not. Yonggun apologizes for the personal question, explaining that only gallery employees visit the exhibition, so he assumed Jio occasionally left the portrait because he felt lonely. Jio explains that he actually prefers places without people and finds living there perfectly comfortable. Yonggun then asks whether Jio simply dislikes talking. Jio denies it. He explains that he has already spent too much of his life talking and has always imagined a future where he would not have to speak endlessly, carry so many burdens, or constantly worry about everything. Living inside the portrait fits that dream perfectly. Yonggun carefully asks whether Jio was once human. Jio immediately corrects him, insisting that he is still human. Yonggun rephrases the question, asking whether Jio once lived as an ordinary human before becoming trapped inside the painting. Jio confirms that he did. The answer leaves Yonggun thinking deeply. Humanoid monsters generally fall into 2 categories: those born as monsters who gradually evolve into human forms, and those who begin as humans before becoming part of the root and transforming into monsters. Yonggun wonders whether Jio belongs to the second category, which could explain why he continues insisting that he is human. Yet that possibility creates another mystery. Monsters retaining memories of their human lives are usually consumed by powerful negative emotions, while Jio remains unnaturally tranquil. His calm does not resemble someone living happily. Instead, it feels like the silence of someone standing at a funeral and quietly mourning a death. Yonggun asks whether Jio ever gets bored. Jio casually replies that he simply eats. Yonggun is stunned. He can barely believe a painting can eat, and Jio's expression makes it even harder to imagine him enjoying food. For a moment, Yonggun even wonders whether his meals might somehow involve humans. He asks what Jio actually eats. Jio explains that he simply cooks whatever he likes, prepares everything himself, and enjoys eating because he is an ordinary human. To Jio, Yonggun's question seems strange, while Yonggun feels the explanation only makes him seem less human. Jio soon realizes what Yonggun is truly trying to discover. He understands that Yonggun wants to learn the rules governing the portrait and determine what is possible inside it. Interestingly, Jio has been trying to discover the portrait's limits as well. With that in mind, Jio decides to ask Yonggun to help him test something he has been curious about. Jio explains that living inside the portrait allows him to experience certain pleasures that would otherwise be impossible. When Yonggun asks how, Jio says he needs a little help from him. Jio makes an unexpectedly simple request. He asks Yonggun to draw an apple on the portrait. Although touching such a valuable artwork makes Yonggun uncomfortable, he takes out his drawing supplies. When Jio asks whether he always carries them, Yonggun explains that he tries to keep useful items with him because he never knows what might happen inside the gallery. The current situation proves exactly why that habit is useful. Yonggun carefully draws an apple on the portrait. To his complete astonishment, Jio immediately reaches for it and eats it. The painted apple has the scent and taste of a real one. Jio calmly explains that since he is an ordinary human living inside a painting, he believes he should be able to do ordinary things such as eat. Whenever he does not feel like cooking, he simply paints a finished meal and eats it. Yonggun realizes that no ordinary human could possibly do something like this. Wanting to repay Yonggun for drawing the apple, Jio decides to give him something in return. He remembers experimenting with his abilities after awakening inside the portrait, including painting gems and turning them into pigments for his artwork. His paints and paintings often seemed almost alive, and inside the portrait almost nothing appeared impossible. He had always wondered what would happen if something he created could cross into the outside world. Jio paints a colorful gemstone and successfully brings it through the frame. He hands it to Yonggun as a token of gratitude. Yonggun is stunned that the gemstone was created simply by drawing it. Examining it closely, he asks what kind of gem it is. Jio admits that he does not know, only guessing that it originated deep underground near the planet's core, where it absorbed the immense heat. At that moment, Yonggun becomes certain that Jio is unlike any monster he has encountered. Day 3 of Jio's portrait exploration ends. Afterward, Yonggun gives the gemstone to Bisabul and reports everything he has discovered. He explains that the root is a transcendent existence responsible for maintaining the balance of every universe and dimension while establishing the laws governing them. It functions like an ultimate system, standing above even the gods. The dungeons that appeared on Earth 30 years earlier are fragments of newly born dimensions connected to the root, and the monsters within them emerged as part of those dimensions. This is knowledge known only to the gardeners. Monsters are born from dungeons, while the root's children originate directly from the root. Although their origins and natures differ completely, Geo belongs to neither category. More astonishingly, he can create living beings himself. By day 6, Young-un finds the portrait filled with numerous animals. Geo considers them his new family, and the creatures freely move around the painted world. Young-un realizes that Geo created all of them himself, around 100 in total. Geo describes them as chatterboxes and imagines they would be unbearably noisy if they had vocal cords. The birds gather together to form what resembles a pond, while each one places different objects inside its transparent body for decoration. Their individual preferences make them fascinating to watch. Young-un wonders whether the creatures possess souls. Even Geo does not know the answer. Young-un reflects that the root's children possess no individual egos and cannot hold conversations, while he senses no divinity from Geo, making it unlikely that Geo is a god. Instead, Young-un concludes that Geo is simultaneously a painting and a human, a being capable of directly influencing reality. Through his drawings, Geo can create memories, history, and even fate. Whether he can create actual humans remains unknown. Geo believes it might be possible, but he has no desire to find out. The thought of creating another human being makes him deeply uncomfortable. Geo believes humanity is far too special to be created casually, and insists that he is not extraordinary. He asks Young-un not to think of him that way and to be careful. Later, Young-un returns to Bisabal and explains that although he now understands the story behind the portrait, he still knows nothing about its techniques, the true grade of Geo's soul, or his relationship with the root. Since Geo's influence on humanity remains unknown, Young-un believes the Hunter Association would be the safest place to study the portrait. Bisabal simply smiles. He has no interest in turning Geo into a weapon. He wants the portrait as a work of art, the very reason he founded both his guild and company. As a collector, his pride lies in understanding the story behind a masterpiece and preserving it exactly as it is. He believes Geo's power resembles a natural disaster whose outcome depends on impossible luck. Bisabal continues, explaining that Geo is essentially a natural disaster, yet they can communicate with him, and fortunately he holds goodwill toward them. To him, this is an incredible stroke of luck, almost a miracle. Whatever Geo's true identity may be, they cannot afford to throw such an opportunity away. Yu Shang-gun looks at him in shock and asks if that is why he bought Geo. Since Geo had already appeared at the auction house and was bound to be revealed eventually, Shang-gun wonders if Bisabal made the first move to prevent any potential disaster. Bisabal stands and explains that he tends to see things others cannot. If Geo believes himself to be human, then they simply need to treat him like one. Still holding his suitcase, Yu Shang-gun points out that Geo is on an entirely different level. Bisabal tells him not to be so narrow-minded and to think bigger. Shang-gun remains silent, reflecting on Geo's behavior. He knows Geo is kind, dislikes trouble, holds no hatred toward others, respects people, and never forces his will upon them. Most importantly, Geo seems genuinely afraid of hurting others. Shang-gun finds that difficult to understand. To Geo, hurting a human should be no different from a human accidentally stepping on an ant. Bisabal simply reminds him that Geo is kind. Shang-gun looks at him strangely, pointing out that Bisabal has never even spoken to Geo. He wonders how he could know so much about him. Bisabal smiles and explains that an S-class guild leader needs that level of ability. He should be able to understand someone simply by meeting their eyes. He then gives Shang-gun a clear instruction. He must not pry into Geo's thoughts or do anything that could cause trouble. Instead, he should become a good conversational partner for Geo and occasionally take him outside. Shang-gun asks seriously if he is really being told to do that. Bisabal simply raises his hand, dismissing him. Shang-gun bows and admits that he had been worrying as the collector's curator. He then smiles and says that he will trust the guild leader. As he leaves, Shang-gun clarifies inwardly that he is really trusting Bisabal's judgment, the eyes that can see what ordinary humans cannot. Bisabal calmly orders him to provide Geo with the absolute best service the collector can offer. Outside the building, Yu Shang-gun feels relieved. He had not wanted to hand over a being of the source who could communicate so well to the association. Their research methods were practically abusive. Shang-gun reflects on his past as a gardener. The being of the source, known as the garden, had chosen someone to care for it, and the chosen gardener devoted their heart and soul to maintaining it. Because the condition of the garden affected the difficulty of the dungeons connected to it, gardeners took great pride in their work. They grew deeply attached to their gardens and naturally developed curiosity and affection toward the beings of the source that formed their foundation. While walking down the street, Shang-gun notices a food stall and remarks that Bunjio Pang's stalls have become difficult to find. He remembers Geo telling him that he enjoys eating. Approaching the stall, Shang-gun watches the owner roast the pastries and thinks about Bisabal's advice. If Geo truly believes he is human, and his natural kindness comes from that belief, then Songgun must do everything he can to preserve that illusion. Later, when Songgun meets Jio again, he holds out a packet of freshly made bunjeopang and asks how old he is. Jio calmly answers that he is 29. Songgun smiles awkwardly and reveals that he is 33. Surprised to learn that Jio is so young, Jio admits that people often tell him he has a mature-looking face, but Songgun's reaction still hurts a little. Songgun quickly assures him that he did not mean it that way. He then thinks about how strange it is that an entity even Bisabale recognized, something humanity could never hope to stop, believes himself to be under 30. Songgun wonders whether Jio's belief that he is 29 might simply be another delusion. Looking toward the painting, Songgun admits that he never expected Jio to be younger than him. Jio becomes curious about Songgun's age and politely asks him to tell him. Songgun answers that he is 33. Jio then tells him that he has a very youthful face. Songgun hides his smile behind the fish packet, amused that a being of the source is the one complimenting him on his youthful appearance. Jio suggests that since Songgun is older, they can speak more comfortably with each other. Songgun asks if that is really okay and agrees to speak casually from then on. Jio replies that he has no memory of ever insisting on formal speech in the first place. With a smile, Songgun offers him the packet of bunjeopang as a gift and begins considering when would be a good time to take Jio outside. A system window appears. Portrait of Jio, Investigation Day 17. Songgun then explains that if the source were compared to a single human body, what they call a garden would only be a small part of it, like a blood vessel, fingernail, heart, or eye. Jio finds the explanation fascinating. Songgun smiles and admits that he finds Jio fascinating as well. Even after being chosen, managing a garden is difficult, and many gardeners have died doing it. It is not a responsibility that leaves much free time. Jio then asks whether becoming a gardener is something a person absolutely has to do. Songgun places a hand beneath his coat and explains that it is not something one can freely choose. Even though he now works as a curator, he cannot simply abandon his duty as a gardener. Songgun takes out a pouch and hands it toward the painting, telling Jio that these are the seeds he asked for earlier. Jio immediately reaches a hand out from the painting, takes the pouch, and thanks him. Songgun looks surprised at the sight, remarking that this is the first time he has seen Jio casually extend just his hand into the outside world. Jio then asks whether doing so is difficult for him. Songgun walks over to pick up his suitcase and admits that it is a little difficult but still manageable. He then explains that whenever he closes his eyes, he can see a massive snowy mountain and glacier. The sheer scale of the scenery is mesmerizing, and having a garden of his own is something he finds wonderful. Closing his eyes, Songgun quietly reflects on the feeling. Jio turns back toward his own world and says that he understands. While gently petting Bubble, he adds that he feels the same way. Songgun agrees. Then he looks toward Jio and asks if he would ever like to come outside. If Jio wants, Songgun offers to show him around. Holding Bubble in his hand, Jio looks at him curiously. For sightseeing? Songgun considers the idea carefully. Making an offer to a being of the source is not something to take lightly, especially when Jio's true identity remains unknown. There is no way to predict how Jio might interact with reality, but stopping him is impossible. If Jio is eventually going to venture outside, Songgun decides it is better to understand what might happen beforehand. Looking at Jio, Songgun explains that he seems unfamiliar with the outside world and offers to guide him if he ever decides to leave the painting. Jio touches his chin thoughtfully. After spending so long inside the painting, he wonders if this might finally be the time to return to society. He accepts Songgun's suggestion and asks when would be the best time. The following day, Jio works in his garden while Gurgle rests on the pouch of seeds nearby. Jio casually remarks that his father seems to have a lot on his mind. As he digs the soil, Jio reflects on how frightened the people outside seemed of him. Since his paintings manifest into reality whenever he leaves them, he suspects there is a difference between how humans perceive him and what he actually looks like. Even when the staff spoke to him, they seemed distant, as though they were facing something completely unknown. It felt almost as if there were a difference in resolution between them. Gurgle suddenly cries out, drawing Jio's attention. He reassures the creature that the experience was a little strange but did not really bother him. While watering the seeds, Jio remembers his promise to go outside with Songgun. He wants to somehow bridge that gap in perception so that people will not be so frightened of him. After finishing his work, Jio adjusts his hat and admires the completed garden, pleased that another project has turned out well. Looking over his vegetable patch, he recalls his grandmother's belief that people should work if they want to eat. Gurgle lands on his hat and looks at him curiously. Gio tells the bird that simply being cute is already enough of a contribution. He then remembers how surprising it was when Gurgle evolved enough to understand him. Because the bird is warm and has a different coloring from other water birds, Gio decides it deserves a proper name. Holding Gurgle in his hand, Gio considers several possibilities. He briefly suggests Golden Child, but immediately rejects it, admitting that even he thinks the name is terrible and that the bird has an unusually deadpan expression. After studying its sweet coloring, he settles on the name Honey. The bird gives a soft chirp, seemingly accepting it, and Gio smiles, joking that Honey is being very generous by accepting such a name. Gio then returns home. Inside, several canvases are scattered around the room. He decides to finish the landscape paintings before getting some well-earned sleep. He sits down and resumes working on a half-completed painting of ocean waves. As he paints, a system message appears, indicating that it is searching for the corresponding dimension. Nearby, 3 other paintings are visible. One is covered in flames, another is completely dark, and the last depicts a black hand surrounded by fire. The system suddenly confirms that a dimension has been found. Sparkling lights begin gathering around the ocean painting, surrounding the canvas with strange energy. The next morning, Gio sleeps peacefully in bed while birds search for food around the pond outside. Gio slowly opens his eyes as a system notification appears before him, asking him to check his new notifications. He immediately sits up in surprise, wondering why the system has chosen to bother him first thing in the morning. The screen displays the ocean painting and identifies it as The Breathing Sea. Several more windows appear listing other completed landscape paintings, including Animal Kingdom and City of the Void. Gio stares at the screens before realizing what has happened. The system has apparently assigned names to the landscape paintings he completed the previous day. More importantly, simply painting those landscapes has allowed him to discover entirely new dimensions. Another notification appears, giving him the option to enter the Breathing Sea. The system confirms that the dimension exists, entry is available, a compatible person has been identified, and synchronization is possible. Gio studies the system's options, wondering whether entering another dimension is actually safe for a human. Before he can think further, Honey flies over and settles on his shoulder. Gio glances at the bird, decides that it looks interesting enough to be worth the risk, and lightly pets it. He jokes that perhaps the system realized how terrible his naming skills were, and deliberately took away his chance to name the paintings. Turning back to the screens, however, he becomes curious about the terms compatible person and synchronization. Gio opens the system's explanation for a compatible person. It describes a method for making an unfamiliar dimension easier to understand. Among the entities existing within the designated dimension, the one most compatible with Gio is selected as the compatible person. With that person's consent, Gio can borrow their soul and body, allowing him to properly comprehend and travel through that dimension. Gio pauses at the explanation and wonders whether the only requirement is having a name similar to his. The system displays 2 candidates, Giovanni and Argio. Gio studies the images carefully. He quickly dismisses the idea that a simple name match could be enough. The system would not designate someone as a compatible person without considering more important conditions. He focuses on Giovanni and concludes that the selection is probably based on their synchronization rate or how well the person can adapt to him. The discovery excites Gio. With something this interesting to investigate, he feels he will never run out of things to do. He then switches to another system screen for City of the Void. Instead of finding an existing dimension, the system reports that the corresponding dimension does not exist and asks whether he wants to register it. Gio selects yes, realizing that he may have just created an entirely new dimension. He looks at Honey and marvels at how unpredictable life has become, encouraging the bird to trust him because life itself is already like a hurricane. Another notification immediately appears. New notification tip, resolution issue. Gio looks at it with satisfaction, convinced that things are finally going his way. The system recommends using Gio as the solution to the resolution problem. Seeing Giovanni's image again, Gio decides that this alone is enough reason to give the process a try. The system screens disappear, and Gio suddenly finds himself inside a laboratory. He immediately checks his shoulder and realizes Honey is gone. Complaining about the rough transition, he wonders where he has ended up. The system identifies the location as the Breathing Sea and explains that it is connected to Giovanni's mental world. Gio adjusts his clothes and admits that, at least this time, the system has been helpful. He looks around and realizes that the mental world resembles an old hospital. A tall man with long blonde hair and white clothing then walks toward the doorway. He turns and notices Gio standing there. Gio, still dressed in black, looks at him in silence before stepping forward and greeting him. He is struck by how closely the man's face resembles his own. The blonde man smiles politely and introduces himself as Giovanni of the Batlin family. Gio introduces himself and realizes that Giovanni is the compatible person identified by the system. He immediately notices how similar they look, joking that if he had been born a foreigner, he might have ended up looking like Giovanni. Giovanni agrees that they probably share many other similarities. Gio disagrees, pointing out that he cannot smile as warmly as Giovanni. He recalls that his inability to smile naturally has caused people to misunderstand him. Some assumed he had lost someone close to him in a tragedy or had a dangerous past, when in reality, he was usually thinking about something as simple as what he would eat after the dinner bell rang. Giovanni finds that concern refreshingly honest and reminds him of the students he once taught. He assures Gio that through their synchronization, Gio will eventually be able to smile naturally like him. Remembering the system's explanation, Gio wonders whether synchronization can really make him become more like Giovanni. Giovanni explains that he will ask for Gio's consent first, but the process will involve his body and soul merging with Gio's. Gio then asks whether Giovanni feels afraid or resentful about being used simply so Gio can explore a new dimension. To Gio, taking someone's body and soul for that purpose sounds like theft. Giovanni responds with a faint smile that nothing is truly being stolen because he is already dead. His soul is returned to the sun, while his body should have turned to dust and been buried in the earth. However, that never happened because his homeland was completely swallowed by the sea. Gio is stunned and asks whether Giovanni's home was really consumed by the ocean. Giovanni calmly confirms that it was destroyed by the sea. Gio finds the story difficult to process, especially coming from someone he has only just met. Giovanni simply asks him to listen. He explains that almost nothing remains of his world now, except for mermaids hiding deep beneath the sea. Their planet gradually shrank until it became like a game board, transformed into a dungeon governed by its own rules. Gio remembers Yu Sung-gun's explanation about dungeons and the dimensions that appeared after the Great Cataclysm. Giovanni admits that the concept never existed in his world, so he had never heard of it. But when Gio called him, everything became clear. They were both named Gio. Still, Giovanni emphasizes that they are not the same person. They are two completely separate human beings who, by some extraordinary coincidence, happen to share countless similarities. He then explains that their souls will eventually merge, something that could be compared to resurrection or reincarnation. Giovanni will become part of Gio, sharing his experiences and creating new memories so that he can continue living within the source. Gio is surprised by the mention of the source. Giovanni explains that although the concept may still be unfamiliar to Gio is already living within it. Gio recalls hearing about the source from someone he recently met and wonders whether the place he lives in is actually the source. Giovanni clarifies that the source is simply a name humans on Earth gave it. Its true name, form, and governing laws remain unknown. As nothing more than a humble soul, Giovanni can only answer Gio's call and align himself with him. Before proceeding, however, he asks Gio for one favor. He wants Gio to look after the sun god from his world. Gio points at himself in disbelief. He considers himself an ordinary human and cannot understand how he could possibly take responsibility for a god. Giovanni admits that he once felt the same way while he was alive. He explains that unless a god itself is part of the source, it can eventually be forgotten when people stop believing in it. The sun god will not simply disappear, but Giovanni still worries about him as his son. He asks Gio to simply remember the sun god from time to time, speak with him occasionally, and borrow his power when necessary. Giovanni smiles and assures Gio that, as a priest shaped by sunlight, he will make sure caring for the sun god never becomes a burden. Gio touches his chin and considers the request. To him, it sounds almost like keeping a lonely elderly person company. He admits that he is actually good at that, having volunteered for such work since his college days. Giovanni laughs, relieved to hear it, and entrusts the sun god to Gio. Gio then asks if there is anything else Giovanni wants from him. Giovanni acknowledges that looking after a god already sounds like enough of a burden, but there is one more thing he wants to ask. He quietly mentions a name, Arya. Gio repeats the unfamiliar name, and Giovanni explains that Arya was one of his students. He then asks Gio to bring her story to an end. The next morning, Gio returns to his own world. Honey sits on the floor nearby as the system displays Giovanni's quests, communicating with the sun god and bringing an ending to the Little Mermaid's story. Honey notices Gio's condition and chirps worriedly. Gio grips his arm as an unbearable cold spreads through his body. He assures Honey that he is fine, but a sharp sensation follows, as though his flesh is being torn apart.
The system reports that his assimilation rate has reached 1%. Inside Giovanni's world, Giovanni also shivers from the cold. Despite his condition, he reassures his students that nothing is wrong. Holding their hands and watching them smile, tears fill his eyes. Even while trembling, Giovanni quietly accepts what is happening. He has no regrets about his decision. Looking back on his life, he realizes that despite everything he endured, he was truly happy. Elsewhere, two unfamiliar figures work along a street and comment on how strange the area is, with sunlight seemingly present everywhere.
Back at the guild, Bisabeel works on his laptop. After making several preparations, he decides that the measures should be enough to prevent future problems. A new staff announcement appears on the screen. It explains that recent rumors about a ghost within the guild have caused confusion, so employees are instructed to familiarize themselves with the new employee. The notice identifies the man in the black cloak as Gio and states that he works the dawn shift. Employees are told not to question his identity. If Gio asks for their names, they should simply introduce themselves. They are also allowed to give him gifts, but must accept something in return. Bisabeel reads through the notice and smiles with satisfaction. The following day, employees gather inside the guild and discuss the unusual announcement. One employee asks whether the others have seen the new official notice, while another shows the notice on his phone, admitting that he has never seen anything like it. The conversation quickly turns to the mysterious man in the black cloak. They recognize him as the same ghost from the rumors that had spread through the guild. A blonde-haired employee stands with his arms crossed, while a silver-haired employee looks dissatisfied and asks the question everyone has been wondering, whether Gio, the man in the black cloak, is actually human at all.